Hi there, and thanks for joining us for this late edition of ViuTV News. I'm Patrick Falk. Coming up, LegCo's Finance Committee finally approves a $3.6 billion in education funds after 8 hours of filibustering and protests. Hundreds attend a vigil for Liu Xiaobo, marking the 7th day since his death, as supporters call for a global memorial to the Nobel laureate. And private meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin gives rise to conspiracy claims between the two sides. Okay, we begin with local news, and legislators have finally approved the government's $3.6 billion funding request for education this evening. It followed a day of filibustering and protests at what was the last Finance Committee meeting before LegCo breaks for the summer. The government said the vote was critical in order for schools to obtain necessary resources ahead of the new academic year, which begins close to the end of LegCo's summer recess. 3 hospital expansion and redevelopment plans have also been endorsed, while 4 other items, including the Tungchung New Town extension plan and civil servant pay rises, are yet to be discussed. The meeting descended into chaos as soon as the funding request was agreed to. Pro-democracy lawmakers rushed to the chamber floor in protest over the High Court's decision to unseat 4 of their lawmakers over allegedly botched oaths. The meeting was suspended twice this morning after Labour Party's Fernando Cheung stood in protest holding placards of the 4 ousted lawmakers. He was escorted out of the chamber half an hour later. Well, meanwhile, Chief Secretary Matthew Cheung once again urged Pan Democrats to consider public interest and debate funding requests in a rational manner.
I appeal. The Chief Executive yesterday appealed already. I have to repeat the appeal today to all Pan Democrat political members to deal with the 8 items on the Finance Committee agenda today, next 8 hours, rationally and in a sensible way, because they are all in public interest. All the 8 items, in fact, are urgent, important to the community, and also livelihood issues. So I would urge.
Now, hundreds attended a vigil in Tamar Park this evening in honor of Chinese dissident Liu Xiaobo, who died last week. Mourners laid down flowers on empty chairs and watched a video remembering his life, marking the 7th day since his death. A condolence book was available for participants to pay tributes to Liu. Banners could also be seen demanding the release of Liu's widow, Liu Xia. 7 days is the amount of time the dead need to bid farewell to their loved ones, according to traditional Chinese culture. Meanwhile, a group of rights activists is calling for a global memorial for the late Nobel laureate. The Liu Xiaobo Memorial Alliance will be setting up an online memorial tonight, and other friends of Liu's will gather abroad to remember him. Some say the commemorations on the mainland, though, won't be massive, given Beijing's hardline approach towards dissent, including arrests of mourners in Dalian. Meanwhile, Liu's wife, Liu Xia, is said to have been taken to Yunnan for travel. One relative said it's likely authorities will only allow her to return to Beijing after today. Elsewhere, another Nobel laureate, Malala Yousafzai, has stepped out in support of Liu and condemned China's treatment of the rights activist. Her remarks came during a trip to Nigeria in the hope of raising awareness of education problems there. Liu was awarded the prize in 2010 but could not attend the Oslo ceremony as he was jailed for 11 years in 2009 for subversion of state power. That's after he helped write the Charter 8, a petition calling for sweeping political reform in China and an end to one-party rule.
It is really tragic how states deny freedom of expression, freedom of speech for people, and I think these are really key things that all states should respect and should value. That is the freedom of people, and in true democracies, that is something that should be respected. And I really, it is tragic that he has passed away and we have lost someone like him. But I'm hoping that people will learn from what he did and join together and fight for freedom, fight for people's rights, and fight for equality.
To news elsewhere next, and in what's bound to stoke conspiracy claims between US President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin even further, the White House has now confirmed the 2 presidents held a second private meeting during the recent G20 summit. Ryan Brooks has the details.
Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin had a second, previously unknown private meeting at the G20 earlier this month. and there's no official record of what the two discussed. White House officials confirming Tuesday the U.S. president and his Russian counterpart had a conversation at a dinner for world leaders. Officials didn't elaborate on how long it was or what was discussed, but a second source said Trump reportedly got up from his seat halfway through dinner and spent about an hour talking with the Russian leader. The discussion said to have taken place without a U.S. translator, raising eyebrows among other leaders in what's been called a breach of national security protocol. Trump is under intense scrutiny over Russian interference in the U.S. election, so all eyes were on the president when they held formal talks on July 7th at the summit, in which Trump said Putin denied allegations that he directed efforts to sway the presidential outcome.
Meantime, Trump had a clear message for opponents of his healthcare bill, which collapsed in the U.S. Senate yesterday, dealing a huge setback to his bid to repeal former President Barack Obama's signature healthcare bill.
I've been saying that, Mike, I think you'll agree, for a long time. Let Obamacare fail. It'll be a lot easier. And I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it. We'll let Obamacare fail, and then the Democrats are going to come to us and they're going to say, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Or how do we come up with a new plan?
Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull called the fatal shooting of an Australian woman by Minneapolis police over the weekend shocking and inexplicable. The country's diplomats are seeking answers from US authorities. A dawn vigil was held on a Sydney beach where the victim, Justine Damond, called home. She was killed in Minneapolis on Saturday night after she made a 911 call to report a possible assault in her quiet neighborhood. The fatal shot fired through an open window of a patrol car. The Australian Prime Minister is now demanding answers.
This is a shocking killing. It's inexplicable. Our hearts go out to her family. I mean, how can a woman out in the street in her pyjamas seeking assistance from the police be shot like that? It is a shocking killing, and yes, we are demanding answers on behalf of her family, and our hearts go out to her family and all of her friends and loved ones. It's a truly tragic killing there in Minneapolis.
Meantime, the US has imposed new economic sanctions against Iran, despite the country's adherence to its international nuclear deal. Washington says Iran has engaged in what it calls malign activities in the Middle East, which undercut any positive contributions emanating from the nuclear accord signed in 2015. Tehran agreed to curb its nuclear program with 6 world powers, including the US, in exchange for lifting oil and financial sanctions. The US State Department said Iran was undermining regional stability, security and prosperity in the region, acting against the spirit of the nuclear deal. A senior US Army official says North Korea doesn't have the ability to strike the states with any degree of accuracy, despite Pyongyang's firing of an intercontinental ballistic missile earlier this month.
I do agree in principle with the assessment that the North Koreans are moving quickly to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile capability. I, however, am not sanguine that the test on the 4th of July demonstrates that they have the capacity to strike the United States with any degree of accuracy or reasonable confidence of success.
Public executions on riverbanks, school grounds and marketplaces. That's the fate of some North Koreans who commit crimes, including prostitution and theft, according to a new report. Grace Lee has the details.
Shocking new evidence of public executions for petty theft in North Korea. A new report showing locations like school grounds, marketplaces, and riverbanks were all often used for grisly public displays. The charges anything from prostitution or stealing rice and corn from farms to distributing media from South Korea, ending in a public shooting or, according to one North Korean defector, with being beaten to death because, quote, some crimes were considered not worth wasting bullets on.
The more poignant and powerful reason for them is that they are a powerful tool of control by the creation of fear. And I think the fact that, the victims' families, co-workers, and even children from local schools are sometimes summoned to watch these events in public spaces is indicative of the fact that this is a means of deterrence, a means of inciting fear, and establishing at least outward, unwavering loyalty to the regime and essentially its leaders.
The South Korean NGO behind the report says it aims to document the locations of public killings and mass burials to support an international push to hold North Korea accountable for what it calls crimes against humanity. Pyongyang rejects charges of rights abuses, saying its citizens enjoy protection under the Constitution, and instead accuses the United States of being the world's worst human rights violator.
All right, time for a break now, but do stay with us. There's plenty more coming on the show, including more on this gentleman who spent the small hours of this morning waiting to get his hands on something special. We'll tell you what when we return.